Call the meeting to order of the regular meeting of the Birmingham Planning Board for Wednesday, April 9, 2025. Could we please call the roll?
Sarah Klein. Robin Boyle.
Here.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here.
Bert Kosa.
Here.
Daniel Scher.
Here.
Janola Boyce.
Here.
Brian Williams.
Here.
Duncan Curry.
Here.
Nassim Rumen. Carter Anderson. Olivia Batanzos.
So
That
our
was
students
both
are
here for the
present.
students, yeah.
Must not be on break anymore. So, back. All right. Welcome to the meeting. Before we, actually, we should approve the minutes or review and approve the minutes of March 26, 2025. Are there any comments on the minutes as presented in the packet?
Move the approval of the minutes of March 26, 2025 as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the proposed motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. My comments are this is a combined meeting of both site plans and study session, which was approved, the format which was approved at the March 26th meeting. And so we will first tackle special land use permit and site plan and design reviews. And so in that regard, we're going to first consider 280 East Lincoln. At this point, we'll consider both the special land use permit and site plan and design review for discussion purposes, and then later, if there are motions, they'll have to be separated. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So the report for this item starts on page 7, and you've got plans starting on page 21 of the packet.
So before we started, the major issue, I think, was Bert's issue raised with regard to safety concerns and with respect to parking, and mostly from vehicular circulation and access. So I had a question at the start. I see the plans are slightly different. Could you comment on the number of parking spaces 2 weeks ago and the number that are proposed now? And then
Sure.
talk specifically
Okay.
about
Do you want me to go
circulation.
straight to that first, or
Yes.
just be included? Okay. So as far as the parking lot, what you saw presented last week had 49 spaces. The applicant did revise the design. I believe that this design has 44 spaces, and so they're meeting the parking requirement exactly at 44 spaces. That is the parking requirement.
But it's fewer than they had 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, they had 49 presented, so they did lose about 5 spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that was the major item of concern. And so why don't you finish
Sure.
your report? I just wanted to highlight that beginning because that was the major reason
Sure.
we
Yep.
postponed this for 2 weeks.
Yep. And so I plan to be pretty brief tonight with my report, but just for the benefit of the public or anybody who may be watching tonight that wasn't last time. So this is an application for 280 East Lincoln Grace Baptist Church, a special land use permit, final site plan and design review. And the application at this time is for a renovation to the church, which includes the removal of 2,650 square feet of existing building to construct a 4,180 square foot addition, along with alteration of portions of the parking lot, walkways, and landscaping. And so I'm just going to go through and highlight sort of the changes to the packet here. So as mentioned by Chair Williams, this application was here at our last meeting 2 weeks ago on March 26, 2025. And at that time, the applicant, the planning board expressed concerns about the lack of connection between the north and south portions of the parking lots. And so then a decision on the item was postponed to the April 9th, 2025 meeting, which is tonight, in order for the architect to reconsider the overall parking lot design. which again is different tonight in your packet. So just a reminder, some other aspects of the site plan that will require additional consideration is just that the site plan proposes an exterior stairwell on the east side of the building that would encroach into the required 10-foot side yard setback. That is the same as last time. It's the same now, and so the applicant will be required to meet the 10-foot side yard setback or receive a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Additionally, the site is currently non-conforming to the open space requirements for the R2 zoning district per Article 2.08, which requires a minimum 40% open space. And so the current open space of the subject site is 28.8%, and the site plan under review proposes 26.78%. So just about a 2% increase of the nonconformity there. And since it's an expansion of the nonconformity, they'll be required to meet the requirement or receive a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. So just noting that in your packet. They do, however, meet the lot coverage at 22.1%. The maximum lot coverage required is 30%. Just noting again on the parking lot screening that they are screened with cap masonry per the ordinance on two sides, the north and the east, which face the public streets, and then on the west and the south sides, bordering residential, they do have that variance received on July 10th, 2007 for wood privacy fencing, which remains. So then, back to the main point at issue here, which Chair Williams brought up, is that there are no changes proposed to the vehicular access to the site. Vehicles can still access the site via 3 curb cuts, 2 on Edgewood and 1 on Lincoln. At the request of the planning board, the applicant has proposed to connect the 2 lots via a one-way access drive so that vehicles entering the south portion of the lot from Edgewood may exit onto Lincoln through the north portion of the lot. And planning staff did have the opportunity to meet with the applicant team to discuss these options and to look at alternatives, and it was determined that this was the best design to meet the church's needs while providing the requested connection between the 2 lots within the current constraints of the existing lot. As I said before, they will lose about 5 spots with this design and will still meet the parking requirement exactly at 44 spaces. And I think that is basically all I wanted to say, just to then reiterate that the planning division is recommending approval tonight of the special land use permit final site plan design review application for 280 East Lincoln Grace Baptist Church, subject to several conditions. I believe we have 7 in your packet. They're largely the same, basically the same conditions that we brought forth at the last meeting. I made some slight adjustment to the language of a couple of them that it seemed like might be helpful to the board to try to make it clearer. I can read those again if you desire. And
I think they're in the packet.
they are in the packet. And so then the last thing I just want to note for the board and for Laura on Zoom is that they do have an important member of the applicant team who is on Zoom tonight, Andrew Iverson, the architect. So if Laura is able to give him speaking power when we go to the question portion, that would be really helpful, because there may be some things that he needs to chime in.
Before we get there, any questions or comments to the planning department from the board? Questions?
Chair Williams, just for me, so it said, usually when we're going for variances and things, if you have any commentary to provide that may be helpful for the Board of Zoning Appeals,
Yeah.
whichever way you rule on those variances, I'm
Okay.
not suggesting.
When we
we
get
were
to it,
denied.
we'll deal with that.
When you make your comments, please, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's hear from the applicant.
Excuse me, can I
You want some?
ask a question? Do you know if the applicant has discussed with you folks the interior landscaping or with the arborist, the tree requirements? Because I notice in the conditions, there are the condition that the applicant comply with suggestions of you guys on interior landscaping and the arborists on trees, I think it was.
Yeah, so I don't believe there was any specific issues with the interior landscaping. With the trees, I know that the arborist did point out several very specific things. I believe they had made some changes to the site plan that reflected that, but maybe not all, as in, like, I noticed the species of trees didn't necessarily change. So, potentially, I would ask, maybe you could ask the architect if he does plan to meet those, conditions.
And so could we then fairly remove the condition that the applicant's required to implement interior parking lot landscaping as modified by city staff?
Well, I guess the reason we typically put that in is just like in the case that, like, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. It's more like for DPS in the case that there's a request, but it's really more for the street trees. Nick, do you have a preference?
To me, it just leaves us some wiggle room. It leaves us a little bit of, I don't want to use the word control, but power to ask them to continue to work on changing those. City staff, of course, being all-encompassing, not just planning, but DPS and engineering too.
So I typically, when I think of these things, I think that what I think I hear you guys talking about is encompassed with the comply with the requests of all city departments. When I see a separate thing that specifically says, for example, street trees or interior parking lot, it does two things for me. One is it makes me think there's some specific concern, and the other is the flip side of what you said, which is from an applicant's point of view, does it give the whichever city department is a little bit too much leverage over discussions? If there's again, for me personally, if there's an issue, particular issue, let's deal with it. If not, let's cope with it in the context of requests for city departments rather than calling out a separate condition. That's just my personal view of it.
And if I may, Chair Williams, very fair. I think we only call it out uniquely because, as we've been very open about, they're not required to do any landscaping technically. And usually when we apply those special land use permit standards in Article 7, we do pull it out to be more specific that they're not required, but we are suggesting that you suggest that they follow those or follow them as closely as they can, which is at least why they're pulled out of the broader number 6, comply with requests of all city departments. I suppose that I'm not suggesting we're opposed to rewording them. I'm just explaining why they're
Yeah,
unique
so I
bullet
guess
points.
if that's the case, and, maybe it's worth the discussion of what the differences is, but I would rather see something to the effect that the applicant's required, in this special land use circumstance, applicants required to comply with the interior parking lot landscaping requirements of the zoning ordinance rather than whatever it is that the planning department or the arborist or somebody might just come up with, out of the air.
Sure, and that sounds good. And if I could suggest maybe just tying it to these plans.
Yeah.
I think we've discussed and we are happy with what they're presenting.
Okay, great.
So if you would just tie it to the plans instead of requiring them to fully meet, I think that would be a happy middle ground,
Great,
if you're willing.
yeah.
Go ahead, Bert.
Can you just, in regards to the landscaping, can you just reference the site plan and show, I get the deficiency on the interior. What other deficiencies are there to meet or comply with the ordinance that they would be seeking a variance for or get the arborist to approve or something? Are there any?
So technically no deficiencies because
Okay.
they're not required to meet either of those standards. I know, when I was reading the letter from the arborist, it sounded like he was, so I have to admit I didn't make like the greatest effort to understand every single point he was making because I kind of leave that up to that department to then communicate with the applicant and work it out so everyone's happy. But as I was reading it, it seemed like, for instance, the arborist, when he was suggesting that they meet the entire street tree standard on Edgewood as opposed to planting any new trees on Lincoln, it seemed like he was suggesting possibly like one less tree overall than they would have been required if they were being held to the linear street tree standard. But that was at the request of the department. So then it didn't seem to make sense to say, hold them to the street tree standard exactly, if then DPS was going to say, well, we want this many trees on Edgewood instead, which is like one less. Does that make sense?
Well, so for the most part, the both on Edgewood and Lincoln, there are no changes really proposed, right? So it's an existing condition. If this was a totally new development, normally, we're used to seeing thou shalt have a street tree every 30, feet or whatever and things like that. So is that one, so are those new street trees that are being proposed?
That was my understanding, was that they were proposing street trees. And then, so the arborist responded, the initial design was slightly different than what is tonight, I believe. And the arborist was responding to that with some requested changes.
Okay.
Why don't we clarify when the applicant comes in?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's meant, any
And
other?
And Bert, just so you
questions?
know, forgive me, Chair Williams, may I? I think that's a yes. If this was another building in a commercial zone, parking lot landscaping standards, we would make them have islands that are
Yeah,
minimum
right, yeah,
180
yeah,
square
yeah,
feet with deciduous trees. Those are the kinds of things we're saying, hey, maybe you don't need to
Understood.
meet the exact letter
Yep.
of the law, but
Yep.
we're happy with what you have.
Well, I got it.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Let's hear from the applicant. You've heard a mishmash, so why don't you address what you've heard?
We're going to get Andy to join?
Lord,
Andy is on here, but I'm Andrew Walters. Really, when it comes to talking about the site, is the professional we want talking at this meeting.
Why don't you introduce yourself again?
Yeah, well, thank you. Andrew Walters with Metro Consulting Associates. I'm the civil engineer for the project. Thank you for your time. I think we talked a lot about what the project was last time we were here 2 weeks ago. We received the feedback that you guys wanted to see connectivity between the two parking lots. I think we've achieved that while still keeping within the minimum required number of parking spaces and allowing for pickup and drop-off activities that the church deems important for the goals of their project. Regards to the landscaping, as we understand it, there are two requirements, potentially requirements for the site: the interior landscaping, parking lot landscaping. Our landscaping plan details out where we think those areas are provided, the trees associated with the interior landscaping area. So as far as we're concerned, we believe that we've at least made an attempt to meet the effort of it. However you guys want to word it, it's the landscape plan is part of our site plan. So
Yes.
if you approve it, we deem that as being sort of binding on the project. The other requirement is the street trees. By our calculation, and I believe the forestry agrees with us that there were, I think, 11 street trees in total required. Initially, the survey only showed 5 street trees on both Lincoln and Edgewood. However, there was one that had not been identified, which is now located on the plan. So that comment was that the required numbers of additional trees dropped from the 6 that we initially had proposed to 5. Their suggestion was also that we provide all of those additional trees over on Edgewood. So we did make the change to show those 5 trees on Edgewood. However, I wanted to get our landscape architect to review the recommended species, just to make sure that we didn't see issues on that regard. So we did not change in the short amount of time that we had to make revisions. We did not make the change to the species, but we do intend to make the revision in species to the ones that are recommended.
Okay. Questions from the board to the applicant? Bert, do you have any?
No, I have comments, but
Okay.
not a question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Back to the board for consideration. Any comments, questions? So go ahead, Stan.
I appreciate the change to the circulation. You want to talk about that?
I just want, have we talked about the building at all?
We talked about it at the last meeting.
Did we? In-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
But you can talk about it again.
Yeah, go for it. If you wouldn't mind, just a 2-minute overview of, because I think the drawings were a little confusing, like what's coming off and what's staying and, you know.
Sure, and actually, the narrative may be a little more confusing. It sounds like we're doubling the size of the area being removed. And Andy Iverson, who's online, can correct this for me, but as I took notes, the existing footprint of the church building in total is 7,081 square feet. We are removing, and I'm sorry, I didn't put down exactly how much was being removed. But with the addition, the proposed changes, the footprint of the building will only be 8,682 feet. So it's an increase in area of about 1,600 square feet.
That crosshatched east section is demolished, and in its place, you're building a 2-story building or something with a lower?
It's a main floor and a basement area.
All right, and that stair, that exit stair, I presume that's coming from the basement, that's why you need to get out of there, you need another
Correct.
exit.
Correct. Although the addition will internal to the building will be an elevator system. The entrance down there on the south will be at a lower level than the rest of the site. So there will be an elevator to provide accessibility to the rest of the building, both upper and lower floors.
Can you go to the floor plan just so we can see that, why that exit stair? Because you're going to need a variance for that, correct? Because it encroaches into the setback, so.
Yeah, they will need some amount of variance for the stairwell. It's allowed to encroach a little bit into the side yard, but not as much as they have it.
Okay, so it's an assembly building, you've got a lot of people down there, you need 2 ways out of it, and that's you have 3 ways, but yeah, okay.
Correct. So if for whatever reason that variance doesn't get approved, the stairwell will have to be provided somewhere else, either internally or another face of the building.
And then the exterior elevations, it's brick to match the existing building, and at least graphically, it looks like it's all nicely integrated.
yeah,
Who are there?
okay. Anything else? Any other board members with a comment for the applicant? Question? Okay, thank you. All right, back to the board for consideration. Any comments, further comments?
So just to finish my thought,
Sure, finish your thought.
thank you. If I can sort of stall while I'm retrieving it. So, I mean, I'd like to change. Thank you very much for that. I think the project's fine. I have no problem with the open space variance. Looking at the site visually, it really integrates just fine and out of place with either the, what I expect the senior center to be to the east and to the credit union and dentist office farther east. I think it doesn't stick out at all. I guess the only other thing I'll say beyond what I've already said is that if I make the motion, I will be indicating that the applicant enter into negotiations with the city for a shared parking agreement, rather mandating that they accept in effect whatever
Yeah,
the city wants to insist on.
that's fine. I would concur with that. I think my own view on that is, my guess is the city needs to negotiate is probably more than you do. So I'm hopeful that will take place, but I don't think we can mandate an agreement. So I concur with your thoughts. So you're the essential scribe of most of these difficult motions, so I'm going to let you take a shot at this, and then we'll think about it.
So this, as is customary for us, I'll break this into two separate motions, one for the special land use and one for the site plan.
Special land use permit only first.
That one first. So I move that the planning board adopt the findings of the planning department in the report dated March 26, 2025, related to the approval criteria outlined in Article 7, Section 7.36 of the zoning ordinance, and recommend approval to the City Commission of the special permit land use application for 280 East Lincoln Grace Baptist Church, based on the site plan drawings submitted to the planning board on April 9, 2025, and subject to the following conditions. One, the applicant submits plans that meet the 10-foot side yard setback or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Number two, the applicant submits plans that meet the minimum open space requirement or obtain a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Number three, the applicant must enter into negotiations for a shared parking agreement with the City of Birmingham to reduce the impact of parking in the neighborhoods. Number four, the applicant must comply with the request of all city department. And lastly, the applicant understands that site plan approval shall be valid for a period of 1 year from the date it is granted. Upon request, the appropriate reviewing body may grant an extension of not in excess of 1 year to the applicant.
This isn't the site plan.
Oh, sorry. Duh. Let's drop that one. Thank
Drop
you.
that.
Okay.
Oh, second.
Motion second, and we'll get back to the open space issue that you wanted
Yes,
to
and
cover.
it's a friendly amendment request on the motion language.
Yeah.
I think we just missed it. But if you wouldn't mind, in the introductory paragraph, it says in the report dated March 26th,
Oh, we got to
if we
update
could do
that.
it
Sorry,
on
guys.
April 9th.
April 9th, yeah.
As
Yes, please.
amended.
So it's the April 9th report.
Okay.
You cool with that?
Is that acceptable
Robert?
to the second?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any discussion on the motion for special land use permit? To the public on the motion, are there any comments from the public on the motion? Okay, back to the board. Let's do a roll call vote.
Daniel Sher,
Yes.
Robert Boyle,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kozak,
Yes.
Penelope Boyce,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Duncan Curry.
Yes.
Okay, halfway there.
All right.
Back to you, Mr. Scribe.
And this, I now move to the planning board adopt the findings of the planning department in the report dated April 9, 2025, related to the approval criteria outlined in Article 7, Section 7.27 of the zoning ordinance, and recommend approval of the City Commission of the final site plan and design review application for 280 East Lincoln, Grace Baptist Church, based on the plan submitted at the planning board on April 9, 2025, and subject to the following conditions. Number one, the applicant submit plans that meet the 10-foot side yard setback or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Number two, the applicant submit plans that meet the minimum open space requirement or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Number three, the applicant must enter into negotiations for a shared parking agreement with the City of Birmingham to reduce the impact of parking in the neighborhoods. Number four, the applicant must comply with the requests of all city departments. And number five, the applicant understands that site plan approval shall be valid for a period of 1 year from the date it is granted. Upon request, the appropriate reviewing body may grant an extension of not in excess of 1 year to the applicant prior to the expiration date in accordance with Article 7, Section 7.28 of the zoning ordinance.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Scher, seconded by Mr. Boyle. Any discussion by the board?
Yeah, just some comments. In regard to the side yard setback, so the ordinance doesn't discriminate whether it's a, 2.5-story encroachment in the side yard, or in this case, it's an exit stair, which I presume, exits at grade and might have a railing around it, so that might help you when you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. You know, if this was a new development, I would not approve this site plan for 44 cars or even 50 or 80 cars to have 3 curb cuts into a site like this. And you know, at least, why do I care about that? You know, any curb cut is a potential conflict between a car and a pedestrian and another car, I presume. And a curb cut also, you know, it's asphalt and concrete in lieu of landscaping and plantings and screen walls. So, but you have an existing site, you're working with existing conditions, it's not a new development, and at least I appreciate, you know, to me the most, I can think of circumstances where, unfortunately, where, you know, someone has backed up and killed somebody. And so it's the most important thing I think our ordinance does and we do is to be, create the safest environments that we possibly can. So the fact that I can come in, because I'm always late for church, and those parking spaces are used, and I can loop around, and at least a couple of us go to a church that it's okay if you're creative a little bit when you're busy, parking aisles and whatnot, because everybody comes and goes at the same time. But, and I would, we don't know if the community center is going to happen or not, but it is owned by the city of Birmingham, and I think any opportunity for you to go there and use their parking and for them to come, that's just a good urban planning. So I'm going to support this proposal.
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, I think we've reviewed the project now at 2 different meetings. I think it is a solid project, and I like the changes, frankly. I think it's an improvement to the site. So to the extent that the Board of Zoning Appeals may have to consider these 2 things, I think in my context, it's a solid project, and on the vehicular traffic flow, they have done what we asked them to do.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that very much, and I hope the Board of Zoning Appeals appreciates what you have done to make the project, in effect, safer. Any other thoughts from the board? All right. We have a motion and a second, and now to the public on the motion. Not hearing anything, I'm not seeing anything, so back to the board. Let's do a roll call vote on the motion.
Ernie Rocher,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes?
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kozak,
Yes?
Janelle Boyce,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Duncan Curry.
Yes.
Okay. So go forth and build a bigger church.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
And my grandparents, who were Bethel Baptists, probably like
You
this.
told us that last time.
Yeah, I know. But it wasn't on record. Now it is.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Back to our agenda. We now deviate from site plan consideration to study session. So our students get 2 in 1 here. The first item is item K1, impervious surface. I liken this topic and what will follow as the endless conversation. I don't recall ever talking about cement, stones, and landscaping and green space as much as we have in the past year. But that's just me.
We've lost our civil engineers.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they're getting their teeth cleaned or something.
Yeah, well, that was a common fallacy.
Okay. So at a high level, yes. Actually, it was one of our illustrious civil engineers that brought this to us, so you
I
have
know
them
that.
to thank
But he bailed on it.
for it. Yeah, and we've been through several iterations of this. I started just working on the definition of impervious surface where the perceived issue existed in the first place. lots of conversations about basically one word, a couple of words, stone and gravel, and what it means to strike it, what it means to leave it in terms of our application of these standards. Ultimately, we decided to sort of go away from the definition, and admittedly, what you asked me to do at the last meeting was to explore more of Article 4, Section 4.31, which is the paved surface limitations. You thought maybe let's imitate what we do for the front yard, for the sides and rear. Ultimately, in talking with the building department, and also just sort of logically, it became sort of difficult to apply percentages to each side yard, both to understand as a person trying to apply and interpret this ordinance, but also from an administrative workload perspective for the people that do these reviews. And what was also said at that meeting, the last time we talked about this, was there was a comment from somebody, maybe even me, I can't remember, but brought it up to a higher level and basically just said, well, okay, so what are we looking for here in our open space? We decided we don't want yards full of stone, but we also decided that, stone is generally pervious, so it shouldn't be prohibited per se. So what I thought would be a better approach, and this is a new approach for you, this is the first time we've taken this approach. We borrowed it from, I think, Ferndale uses it, a couple of other communities use it, is to really define what we mean by open space. So in the single-family zoning districts, you're required to have 40% open space. That's space that's free of buildings, impervious surfaces, et cetera. So of that 40% open space, what I'm suggesting here is that 75% of it needs to be vegetated open space, i.e. green space. So what I think is clever about this is we get what we want. We won't have yards full of stone. But those folks that say, a lot of examples we see, want to fill the side yard of their garage with stone because it's kind of silly to have landscaping back there, or build an infiltration trench next to their driveway that's predominantly stone. You can do that. It's limited, but you can do that. 75% may seem arbitrary. It's not all that arbitrary after you do the math. It usually leads to about 10% of a typical site that you could have this stone or other surface that isn't impervious but isn't green space. So it offers people a lot of flexibility, or more flexibility, I should say, not a lot more than what currently exists, because as we established before, because stone is in the impervious surface definition, it's basically just not permitted in open space. So that comes with, though, a couple of other changes that are a little bit downstream. I did update this page.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I don't know how we want to do this, but can you have a site plan in there, right? Sort of a
sure.
diagram. So everything that you just talked about, can you just point to that?
Second
Site
page.
plan, so talk about the 75%. So is the 40% still, that's still one of the tests, and the other one now is 75% of the 40% needs to be vegetated or something?
Yeah, basically. So in this, I show you the basics of
Driveways.
of lots and
Garages with
things.
3 cars.
So lot coverage means buildings, so this dark outlined house and garage in this simple example. This is your lot coverage. Open space requirements needs to be 40% of the total lot area. And open space means everything but impervious surfaces and buildings and things. So
And there are allowable exclusions, like you
There are
said, bay
allowable
windows and
exclusions,
chimneys and,
Yep.
overhangs and things like that.
Porches 10 feet in the front, sidewalks 3 feet in width or less, decks up to a max of 15 feet, things
Okay.
like that.
All right.
So of this green space, which in this, again, simple diagram, this is all green because it's open space. So in my new ordinance, 75% of this still has to be green. The other 25%, say like I used the example of the rocks beside the garage, can be those stones. So they're no longer prohibited, but they are limited.
So what is mulch?
It depends on how you use it, I suppose. We could do this all day, by the way, mulch, this, that, and the other.
Water gets through mulch.
Water gets through mulch,
Unless there's a vapor barrier underneath it, right?
Right?
it depends, you could do that, and.
True, but I guess you could do that anyway.
A garden also has mulch in it, but, in my opinion, that's a vegetated space, even if it has mulch.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to be like draconian about it, and checking every last little square inch of your property and counting where's mulch and where's not. I think what I would characterize this honestly is a bit of a Band-Aid. It's trying to make the folks that think stone is pervious and should be permitted happy, but also make us happy in not getting big stone yards and overly applied stone. It's a middle ground, and I call it a Band-Aid because we will be updating our zoning ordinance in the next year or so, and all of this stuff will be
Up for review.
up for review. So in order to get it off our plate, get it off the docket, I thought this might be a nice.
Bert, let's
nice
call on
middle
you
ground.
now first.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I don't have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm good.
So,
think, right?
so it seems like I wonder if, it seemed to me this came to us because somebody was trying to do a bioswale, and I'm making this up, a bioswale is, 7.5 feet by 29 feet or something, and so when I think of stone could be a stone slab that's 8 foot by 8 foot, or it could be gravelish or something like that. So I know the frustration is that stormwater management promotes bioswales and other things or something like that. So,
Yep.
and I know the frustration was like, hey, Oakland County or whatever would approve this, and it's stone, it's impervious. Are you, like some of the other things you're talking about, I've never even thought of it. Yeah, there are probably people that, behind their garage, on the side of the garage. So are you trying to, are there other issues that didn't come up as the bioswale thing that is making you think about this in a more complex way?
Yeah, and the impetus was, as Mr. Emrine, when he was formerly a part of our board, it was an infiltration trench. So a bioswale, if he would have proposed a bioswale with plants and things, I don't think he would have even brought it up.
Okay.
But because he was doing an engineered infiltration trench that had a stone basin, I suppose, crushed stone, all engineered, all for specifically stormwater drainage, that was being called impervious because of our inclusion of stone in the definition of impervious surface.
Right.
So he thought to himself, rightfully so, that things like infiltration trenches shouldn't be considered impervious surface. It's not. But because of our definition and the way it's been applied over, 20 years more, it was. So he thought, we had thought it'd be easy, let's just strike stone, and then we complicated it, and here we are, trying to meet in the middle.
But I think if I can, Nick, I think one of the concerns that made this particular piece a little more complicated is in your next slide about how two-thirds of the front yard
Yes.
open space has to be vegetated, which was designed to avoid the situation which happened about a half a mile from me, where somebody decided they didn't want grass in their front yard and they didn't want nice, pretty plants. They put nice, pretty colored stone patterns in. And so the front yard was all or mostly stone, which didn't seem that attractive to many.
Right.
To any.
Well, the people who put it in,
Well, they don't count.
Okay, I have to go now.
Go
I
ahead.
just wish Scott was here, because again, this gets beyond my expertise.
I appreciate the way you went about this, but I'll admit, I read it 7 times at home and didn't get it.
Okay.
Like, all I could think was that we were going from 40 to 75%. I was even doing math, like, you can't fit anything on this, like, I was so confused. So
Okay.
now that you've explained it, I totally get it, but I feel like it needs like something in here that makes it a little more clear, or perhaps when it's in the book itself and it's all lined up, it'll make more sense. But this, I was like, I thought there was a mistake, honestly. in
Got
the-
it.
So I'll start with that. But now that you've described it better, I see things that I wouldn't have thought about, like the 10% rocks around your garage. Really smart. I have rocks around my garage.
Me too.
I might not even be allowed to right now.
You might be.
But-
after this.
So on to the next part of this with the 65% front yard vegetation requirement. So in that 65%, let's say you've got 1,200 square feet in your front yard, right? That would be on a 30 by 40, a 40-foot wide lot, 30-foot setback, 1,200 square feet. So 65% of that has to be green, and the rest of it can be your driveway, your walkway, and your front porch, right? Is that what this is saying?
You've got it basically right, but what you should also know is, well, what I brought up last time, I should say, I'll say it this way, is that we don't define what paved surface is besides i.e. concrete, blacktop, or other similar material. So I would be a little bit hard pressed to tell you exactly how it's been applied over the years. It's the building department doing that. But to answer your question, that sounds accurate. Anything that isn't concrete or hard surface. No, that's not the way I wanted to say that. It's green except for your standard like concrete or hard surface.
Okay, so what I said was right then.
That's what I believe.
Yes.
Now, what I'd love to do is confirm that with the building department, because I'm not sure, because like we talked about, front porches don't count towards open space.
Right.
So do
But
they mean porches
that's where
too?
I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Would your front porch count towards the square footage of what the coverage would be on the front yard? And so I did some numbers with some different setbacks, some different lots, and the percentages, and, you know, a really not wide driveway, you know, 9 or 10 feet, which is a pretty narrow driveway, and, you know, 30 feet back, and how many square feet of concrete that is, and the numbers are starting to get really, really tight. And so the 65 is concerning me, so I would love you to talk to them maybe, because when I started applying it to actual sites, I was finding things like if you do a 10-foot wide driveway, a 3-foot walk up to your front porch, you've got 25 square feet left for your front porch, you know, which this becomes rather restrictive, I think, and would maybe put some restraints on architects, perhaps, that may want to do something a little different with that front facade that we're probably not intending to do. So if the porches aren't included, for example, in that 65%, then that would alleviate that problem. The other thing I thought of is if we start to put these percentages on as high as 65%, we may end up seeing things like we've struggled with in the past, where people just stop putting walkways to their front door and they just use the driveway. And, you know, we like that connectivity, I think, and we've talked about it a lot of times over the years between the sidewalk and the front porch. So we might end up causing ourselves a few other problems if we're too restrictive. So,
Okay.
so maybe let's just investigate that a little bit more.
It's a fair conversation to have. No one had said that's an issue. Of course, we've had a lot of new houses being built, but it's,
Yeah.
can't hurt to ask.
Stuart? Okay. Couple things. So there's vegetation percentages and all, and, I mean, I start to get the feeling like we're going beyond what we really have a right to do, and that we're dictating landscaping now, which I'm not an expert, but even on HOAs, they don't typically do too much dictating landscaping. It's kind of like, okay, you know, we've got certain parameters on the house, the structure and stuff like that. But, I don't know. I mean, I don't like rocks in the front yard, but I mean, I think there's property rights too. And is that wrong? If you go to places where they are serious about water conservation, you're not allowed to have grass. And we're at the total opposite end of this. So I don't know. starting to scratch my head on some of this is, or do we need to get into this deep? Is it a bit, that big of an issue? We've identified one place. So anyhow, and then the last thing that caused me to scratch my head was having turf is impermeable, because if it was impermeable, wouldn't we have stadiums full of water? So somehow the water gets through in stadiums, so I think it's more of what's underneath it, and if you have drainage and proper things. So we're sitting here worried about the top, but the bottom's kind of more important, maybe.
Dan?
So just a question, Nick, on the drawing, the deck, the porch, and the walkway are in this sort of yellowish color that says exclusions. Does that mean that it's not counted at all in the open space, or it's part of open space, but it's not counted against the vegetation? I mean, how,
It's not counted towards your open space.
okay, so it's not, the 12, using Janelle's example, the 1,200 feet is computed without measuring the porch and the walkway. Is that right?
Currently,
Yeah.
what she's suggesting is, with the tweaks I'm proposing, does that change anything?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which is what I'd be looking into.
Yeah, all right.
Bert?
Let me, again, I think Scott Klein would add a lot to this conversation, because
He
he
will,
started it
when he gets it.
when he gets here. So at least, I don't know what we'll do with this today, but as long as you might be going back to look at some things, there are either some flaws or things that are not clear in the ordinance that relates to open space. If you look at that diagram, you're allowed to increase the size of your garage by 75 square feet if you build the stair internal as opposed to an exterior stair. But it's not clear that that's, because that was a Bruce Johnson or a Zilke thing, but it's not in the ordinance that is one of the allowable exclusions. So look at that, but I don't think it is. And I'll throw one other crazy one at you. I've done this long enough to have all these different experiences. So that deck, if it extends out 15 feet, that is not considered part of your open space, right? So if I'm going to try to describe this. So if that house was in the shape of a U, and that deck was inside the U, you count that now as part of the footprint of the house. It's an odd thing, and it's senseless, because it's not about square footage or whatnot. You're given this freebie if the deck goes out 15 feet from the back, but if you happen to have a house that has two wings, and that same square footage and everything is inside there, all of a sudden, it's not allowable. So just look at that, because I think it's, because there's some bizarre thing like with the front door, and the garage placement has to be behind the furthest off, there's some crazy, so there's another thing like that doesn't allow you to have, if you wanted this, I'll call it a private courtyard, it's the same thing, it's outside space, it's not covered, it's not allowed. So just take a look at that and see if there's some language that can be used to, because I don't think the ordinance is written to prohibit that. It's just, this is allowed and the other one wouldn't be allowed. It's not a setback thing, it's none of that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying no, by the way. We can do that. We've looked through that 4.30 over and over, and we were trying to keep it tight, as in take care of this, which was brought up, and not blow it up, especially because we're going to be redoing the ordinance soon, and because everything's so connected, it's really hard to unwind all the threads that have been wound, both literally in language, but also in the application of these things over 20 years. All of these threads are so interconnected, but it's been helpful speaking to the building department over the next coming months. So because I know this is it's not a decision tonight, we'll continue to have the conversations for sure.
If it's a Band-Aid, why wouldn't we pick a number, not us, but the Jasons and Scotts, that would say, you're allowed to have a 200-foot, whatever you called it, French drain, whatever, with stone aggregate that doesn't exceed more of whatever, and be done with it. Because you took us in a place that you were sitting there trying to do math. And one of the things you have to be aware of is, and I fear for people who are architects, designers who work, and that have never worked in Birmingham before, and come in and they think they understand it, and they do all their work and they submit it and they get rejected. And, and we've gone crazy with generators, and it's, it just keeps getting more and more complicated. So I love the diagram, by the way, whoever did this.
I did that
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow.
in PowerPoint.
That's pretty cool.
So,
All right, moving on.
we've obviously got some loose ends. I noticed on the two proposed agendas that you attached, that you have this thing coming back
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
And so you asked for the next meeting to be mixed also, both site plans and study sessions. Do you really think that you're going to be able to bring impervious service back in 2 weeks?
Fair comment. I don't think I should have put it on the next meeting.
Yeah,
We've got
okay.
site plans coming out of our ears.
Yeah,
So
I
don't think so.
Okay, I agree. So if we postpone consideration of this until the May 14th meeting, I think that would make sense.
Can I ask a question? This thing you were saying with Jason and this trench and all, was this just a left out in the open trench where you could see all the rocks, or, okay?
Yeah.
Because most of the ones I see, they do that, and then they take grass right over the top.
Yeah.
So
This
then,
was an open one, yeah.
Yeah, which is part of our argument. Like, if you wanted to do an infiltration trench and cover it with grass, then it's not an issue, so what are we doing here?
Right.
But
all right. I missed them.
Okay?
Okay.
So if that's the sense of the board, we bring this back in a month,
yeah,
and make some changes, and Scott will be back. I know he'll be back.
yeah, that's great.
Okay. And then when we get to look at the agenda, you're going to take proposed item K completely out, all three of them?
All of those, yes.
Yeah, okay. Any further discussion on this topic? Okay, let's move along to child care ordinance study session.
All right. So this has
Now,
both,
let me go back.
yes.
A board asked, my recollection is last time this came up, we wanted the city attorney to get involved, and I think you've done that.
We have done that.
Okay. So I think it's important for the board to understand that what's coming to us now has the input of the city attorney.
Yep, and that's correct. And when I described this as having changed, our approach has changed a lot, but also not a lot at the same time. The background of that being, when we first came to you, we had that audit by McKenna,
Yeah.
the child care ordinance audit. And what we either misunderstood or was presented unclear to us was, what we understood is that we needed to do that stuff. We thought we were
Yeah.
not in compliance. We thought that we needed to meet the state ordinance. And what it turns out after consulting with the attorney and then doing a little bit of digging ourselves is it seems as though that section of the ordinance is only required for townships. So it became apparent that we don't really need to do all or even most necessarily of what they're suggesting. So it really calmed us a little bit, reduced some of the anxiety about whether or not we're going to be, we're in a precarious position or anything like that. We're
Refresh my
just fine.
recollection, was this report just done for us?
It was a grant that McKenna received
Oh, that's right.
to audit the ordinances of a few volunteer communities. We just happened to volunteer because
Oh, okay.
it was a free
So
audit.
theoretically, there were some townships included.
Yeah, it was and that's not to diminish, it was a good audit. It
Yeah,
was kind of
I
a
understand.
one-size-fits-all audit.
If
So
it was
it's-
just us, they missed the boat.
Yeah, or we did.
Yeah.
It was just unclear. So that's why it got a little bit uncomfortable the first time around, because I think
Yeah.
we were just anxious about
Yeah.
the whole thing. even so, we still think there are some improvements that could be made to the ordinance while we're here, while we've got it open. So, I mean, there's like 80 pages of ordinance language, so forgive us, but it's every last little thing. At a high level, happy to answer your questions after, we did feel as though updates to the definitions to match the state definitions was not a bad idea. They're so close anyways, and when it comes to state licensing and people in the community trying to compare the two and what does this mean and that mean, consistency is a really big helper for those that are trying to do family childcare or group childcare. So again, because they're so similar, we thought, why not just update those? Additionally, because there is state law and because it's so redundant, we still feel as though it's fine to remove the use-specific standards, with the exception of a couple that we added here for group daycare homes. That's up for conversation, of course. The rest of this, basically the rest of this, is making sure that we permit both as accessory permitted uses everywhere that you can do single-family development. So everywhere that you can build a single-family home. So you might see a district where you're like, I think there's PP in here, or not PP, regular P parking districts. You might think, Nick, why are we allowing childcare centers in P districts? Well, because you can build a single-family home there, technically. So 3/4 of this is just adding family child care home and group child care home to accessory permitted uses in all the zoning districts where it applies. The other big change, and I'll try to find an example of it in this C of ordinance, is formerly we required child care centers to go through the special land use permit process. If you recall, we did the one over on, what was it called?
On Grant.
Grant, yeah. Ortiz Educare.
Yes.
And at least I feel what we found is that we put them through a bit of a ringer for
Yes.
what felt like almost no reason. Not no reason. I understand that there's some externalities that come with pickups and drops off. It's all important. And I'm not suggesting that it's not important now, but what I am suggesting is that it may not rise to a special land use permit. So in those districts where they were already permitted in a special land use permit, we just bumped them up to just a commercial permitted use, just to try to remove that barrier and that sort of bureaucracy around those kinds of things. And that essentially is what you're seeing before you. We can, I think we did it last time, we can go through the
Let me
districts.
ask the question a different way, so that I understand the opinion of the city attorney. The city attorney is saying, with respect to the proposed changes you have made, that these are required or suggested?
Suggested.
So what of these changes is required under state law?
I would say that none of them are required.
So that's really a question for me. I don't know that I have necessarily an opinion on this topic, but depending upon where these things spring up, could have, particularly in more congested areas of the city, this could create some controversy. I mean, I understand what the department is proposing here, and I concur in it, but I wonder about the broad application of this and what potential adverse effects there may be in neighborhoods. I just don't know. I don't have a feel for it. And I don't know how we talked about this the last time we considered it. That we really didn't know what effects some of these places would have. I think it's important for a city to have this capacity. That's my own personal view, but I have no idea how the citizens of the city of Birmingham feel in general about this topic, and maybe the board can weigh in here. Go ahead.
What I thought from this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this isn't permitting this anywhere that it's not already allowed to be, but that you, by removing the slup, we lose a little bit of control, I guess.
Yeah.
But I was completely fine with removing the slup requirement. I don't imagine we're going to get a big,
I wouldn't think so.
influx of
I do.
home daycare centers. But, if we want to keep that on there so that we have a little more control, otherwise, I think the cleaning up of the ordinance is
Yeah.
really nice.
Well, I
So-
didn't speak correctly. I was more concerned about the deletion of the SLUP requirement where the city had
yeah.
control. Because that, in general, will get residents in the area involved. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It may, unfortunately, result in difficult decisions one way or the other, but because this isn't mandated, these changes aren't mandated by state law, I think keeping the SLUP is
Sensible.
more protective of all voices in the city. That's my own view, but I could be wrong, depending on your view. Dan, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. Let me deal with one really small little bitty thing first.
Okay.
If you take a look at page 50 of the packet, in the little A,
I don't know how they get there.
you've got
Leave these numbered over there.
group daycare homes must be located in a one-family dwelling. This got rid of the definition of group daycare homes, and I think replaced it with group childcare home.
Good catch.
So I think you probably want to fix that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then, on that same point, it's not clear to me why, again, I'm having trouble keeping these things together, but I think this is the 1 to 7 kid one. And
It's the
if that's right, if this is the smaller of the two,
It's the bigger.
no, it's the bigger.
Yes.
Okay,
I was going to
fine.
ask that question.
Yeah.
The definition of minor children? What's a major children?
18 or over.
major, minor.
Little levity, I like it. I mean, I don't know this for
It's
sure,
catch-22 come back.
but my guess is that the state defines what a minor is,
Yeah.
and so that we don't necessarily need to.
It's under 18
But never mind.
is the legal definition.
Okay.
So Nick, then if you go to the little chart near the end, which is page 107. So if I'm remembering all this right, child care center is the most intense of the uses? Is that right?
Yeah, because it's a commercial
Yeah,
use
okay.
essentially.
So if child care center is permitted in, I can't read these dumb things, but B1, B4, TZ, MX, TZ1, TZ2, and TZ2 and TZ3, if it's permitted, why isn't a group child care home at least an accessory use there, or are we making a mistake to permit child care centers in some or all of those? It strikes me that if the more intense use is permitted, then the less intense uses ought to be at least available or accessory, but I don't have a strong sense on, for example, TZ2 or 3, maybe that's not the right spot for them. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And my third point kind of relates in some way, not directly to Brian's question, but do we need to say or want to say that you can only operate one of these child care homes if you either are licensed by the state or if you meet the state licensing requirements? Because a big part of that was not more than so many within this many feet of each other
Yeah.
and whatnot. And that, I think, goes some significant way towards saying we don't really need a SLUP because those state protections kind of substitute for what the SLUP would have done. But again, as I read this, I didn't see that in the definition anyway, that group childcare, group daycare, family, whatever these things are, have to meet those state requirements or they're not permitted at all.
I love that idea.
So
Yeah.
And if we do that, then subject to taking a look again at the state standards, I
Right.
don't mind not having the slop ban, because I think I remember they were pretty detailed.
But we don't have that in front of us.
I don't have it right. I mean, maybe they're in that giant report from
It might be in the
McKenna.
McKenna stuff, but we can, I'm gonna use the word dumb it down for you.
Yeah.
Well,
Slim it down for you.
I think the sense of this is either we require in the state provisions or we go with a SLUP.
Yeah.
In either case, it provides, for lack of a better phrase, control.
And it should go a ways to addressing what certainly would be some of my concerns if one of these things, I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want them on either side of me, right? I don't know
Yeah.
that I necessarily
Or both
mind
sides.
one.
You wouldn't want them on both sides of you.
Both sides. Well, actually, I only have one, so if I were living in a traditional block, I wouldn't want them on both sides and across the street.
Right. Well, I think there's and that was my concern about losing
Yeah,
the SLUP. Because I think in the SLUP you would control that. But if the state requirements delineate and can address this, what I view as an important issue, as I want to see one neighborhood in the city, for lack of a better phrase, overpacked with these.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so you look at the state provision
Uh-huh.
and come back at the May meeting,
Yeah.
and then I think I'm ready to go with the public hearing at that point, once we've addressed that issue, but I think that's an important issue. And I think it's an important issue for the residents of the city to know that we've addressed that issue.
And please take a look at making sure the waterfall of uses kind of lines up and makes
Yes,
Makes
we'll
sense.
take that fine tooth comb through it. We'll make it public hearing ready for you, yeah.
Robin?
I just want to make a different comment, and perhaps just to put on the record for down the road and the whole question of the zoning. This is just a comment. Maybe this childcare question is part of a deeper question about what we mean by private home. Because as Brian indicated, if you're using this home for, how many children was it at one point, 14? What are the implications for the neighbours? But there are other ones to think about. Post-COVID, we have more businesses established, and if you don't believe you can go and Google, because you can be walking down what looks like a perfectly residential street, and your Google map will bring up, Joe's hardware or fishing tackle provider. It's real. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
There's actually a car wash listed in Stewart's neighborhood.
Exactly.
In Stewart's garage specifically.
It's Stewart's the car wash man.
He shouldn't have quit real estate business. That's it.
Well, yeah,
Wait, I'm not done. And I, in the neighborhood I am in, I'm aware of somebody running their business where there are excessive number of deliveries, so much so that they have boxes around the house which are used for pickup and delivery. It's not just one way. It's not just Amazon delivering dog food. It is materials going out from the house, which is something that wasn't written into an ordinance in 1923. So this is something we might be thinking about as you go forward. I'm not saying we do anything today or tomorrow or even this month, but
But
down the road.
it's part of the larger picture, maybe over the next year.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about.
Great.
Well, life has changed.
Yes.
Yeah, business life in particular. Okay, other issues? So we'll kick this issue, and you will address the issue of the state statutes and the other concerns that
Yep.
Ann has raised.
That sounds
Okay,
great to me.
This will be part 2 of the May meeting. Okay, are we done with that? So I'll move on to L1, pre-app discussion, 525 North Old Woodward Lux Outdoor Dining. This is back from the last meeting. If I can speak on this topic, there were two issues, one of which was positive and the other which I think was perceived by at least one board member to be negative. One was we generally liked the fact that the tables were being removed from curbside, or whatever phrase we use now, to closer to the building. But in light of the history of this site, tables tend to get moved into the pedestrian area, and chairs get moved into the pedestrian area. So I think Janelle's point was, we don't have any barriers or restrictions, I'm not sure what word you used, between the tables and the chairs and the pedestrian walkway area. Am I right?
I was concerned about the use of a rope, that it's too flexible.
Right.
And so, as far as, the thickness of the barrier, I mean, I don't need it to be a big plant or
No,
anything
it's
like
gotta-
that.
it could be
I just-
thin.
But just, yeah, so, yes.
So
I had some concerns
I
about
had
that.
two thoughts on that. Number one, that we would probably, we need something to prevent the tables from moving further out into the pedestrian walkway area, because that's been a problem on this site, where we had tables on both sides. Bert, I'll get you in a second.
Thank you.
And it's a pretty narrow area to begin with, because of the tree grates,
There are
et
no tree
cetera,
grates.
and the planters.
I
But
didn't see it either.
on the other hand,
Thank you.
the wait staff needs to get at the tables. And so we can't have just one big, long,
Didn't need that kick.
and the people need to get to the table, so they need to, there need to be pass-throughs. But there needs to be something, in my view, to restrict the tables, and by implication, restrict the chairs from moving, and I'll speak directionally here, from moving further east towards the street. Now, Bert, you had a comment.
So, I volunteer my time to be here. This is the second time it's been, at least the second time,
And they aren't.
Where's the applicant? I have so many questions about this. I'm glad
I have two
you
pages.
raised these. So so they're moving a street tree. Is that allowable? What's the normal spacing of a street tree? They're going to be like 50 feet apart now, I think. When I look at so a distance from a meter to, I don't know what the railing looks like. I don't know, but it's 4 feet.
Right.
That's not allowable, is it?
No.
So these canopies extend out, it says 5 foot, 5.5 inches, I believe, or maybe, it's not clear to me, but are they when I looked at that street view you just showed, a tree has a canopy. So those trees are not very mature, but can you walk underneath that tree, or are you going to hit your head? So there's all kinds of information. I don't know why I would keep guessing and try to do my own math. And this is a great restaurant. They've been a long time. It's wonderful. It's they own other restaurants. They know how we function.
Yeah.
This is important stuff. And they're breaking the rules, in my opinion. Like moving a street, what is a normal street tree spacing?
40.
40. So I think that's more than 40. So they took it upon themselves to cut down a street tree that currently exists, which is in their previous drawing, and move it
They haven't yet.
to the north. No, I know they
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
yet.
But what makes
but
this
my-
weirder, if I may interrupt, because you're on, this is one of the things on my notes, is that there's another street tree in front of Sal's that's 40 feet away. So there are three equally spaced, there you go.
There you go.
3 equally spaced street trees. So if we take that one in the middle, currently, if we
Right.
take that one in the middle and we shove it 10 feet over closer to,
So there's a
the
saying, I can't remember how it goes, so I'm not
then
going to
look
say
at,
it.
it's that much closer to that tree. I mean,
Right.
so these are all, I have,
Right. So it's-
you were talking, I'm sorry,
Right.
but.
So I think it's putting too
Bigger
much
than
stuff in the bag, or attempting to. And it's only to put more tables out there, and
Well, it's
so-
fewer people.
But it doesn't, I mean, are they entitled to have this as currently?
Yes.
They are. So it's grandfathered.
What, that right there? No,
Yeah, that was approved.
Yes, that was,
they can't keep it any longer since
thought
we
it was
changed the
year by
ordinance,
year.
right?
It's year by year, isn't it?
Yeah, they're a bistro, right? So,
Yeah, but we wrote that non-conforming section of that code, that outdoor dining ordinance, that allows you, because of the nature of outdoor dining, it is annual.
Right.
As long as you don't change the design or the footprint or something.
So
you
they've
can
been
maintain
approved
it.
for this.
So can I take a drink out from the restaurant and go sit next to the curb?
Yes,
and have a drink?
yes.
So there's no law that prohibits that.
Some people that I know have done that.
So
Yeah.
in some ways, oddly,
have a
that,
railing?
you know, at least there's a path straight through and I'm not weaving between, you know, so.
But here's the,
Mr.
look,
Chairman.
we need the applicant here, okay?
Please,
And
please.
there's no sense in for them to submit a proposal for in effect, an amended SLUP or site plan until they come in and talk to us about the plans. Generally, I would say, okay, I like the idea of getting the tables away from the street or the furnishing zone. I just now remember
Well
your
done.
phrase.
Yep.
I like that idea, but we got a lot of questions on, I mean, they're going to wind up with fewer outdoor seats. And my guess is the reason is because they're going to use that space which we previously approved for the expansion of the bistro inside, which hasn't opened yet, I don't think.
No, not yet.
But they're going to have more space inside, which may means they don't need as much space outside. But my concern is, and we've talked about this on several occasions, when you walk the sidewalk here, you bump into chairs and you bump into tables that are moved. There's no, for lack of a phrase, stability to the site. And, you know, and patrons just move stuff.
Yeah.
And we can't expect a server to enforce the ordinance.
No.
You know, I mean, that's just not fair. So my view is, tell them to come back, and they can come back in 2 weeks at the site plan meeting, since we've now deleted 3 study sessions. But they need to be here.
Yeah.
And I would say, as presently constructed, they're not going to get approval with this proposal. I mean, it's clear to me.
Well, as Bert said, they literally can't because they don't meet certain parts of the ordinance as designed now, so.
Get them here and we'll talk to them.
Okay.
And it's a pre-app, this will be the 3rd meeting on a pre-app, and they're sort of abusing the process, frankly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it, Brian, because bringing it back up a little higher here, they are trying to work with us a little bit, meet us in the middle. They do want something from us. They want those retractable awnings, which was the impetus for
Yes,
all
I
of this.
understand. When it
So
rains,
they're
it
trying to
rains.
get the table situation to something we're going to like. So this is,
Look, this is a great restaurant, they're great
Yes.
people, let's just get them here.
yep, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'd bring them back in 2 weeks.
They'll be here. Somebody will be here.
Communications, project updates, any questions?
Yes, I have one. The vault? What is a vault?
Do you recall when Polestar came and the old Blossom space, and then they changed their concept from Polestar to the Vault, which was the high-end
Yes.
vehicles, and we had that kind of fiasco, and you ultimately said, fine, go do it? That's what it was. It's
like
still
the
the same
other
space,
place.
still the same design.
Fried
The building's going to be black but not white, and instead of electric cars.
Is it progressing?
Yeah.
Because Polestar's in Royal Oak now.
Yeah.
No,
They're
well,
going for
that was their
Bert.
temp, and then they're going to make it, this is similar concept to Platinum, right? They're
Yeah.
selling,
Yeah.
Like real niche, like real high-end
yeah,
used cars.
Where are they made?
What is? Who is?
Where are they made?
The Vault.
the Vault.
It's still a La
It's like
Fontaine.
Platinum, it's like Platinum.
Where are they made?
I must have missed a meeting. I thought this was to be the permanent Polestar showroom.
Yeah, they came back in and.
They came back.
Changed it, yeah.
Right. And dropped it
Yep.
They changed it.
to the vault.
It's the same dealership group, they're
But
just,
they're not selling
No,
Polestars.
Polestars are being sold in Royal Oak, aren't they?
Yeah.
which was going to be their temp.
Okay, thanks. That's good. I got it.
You can drive to Royal Oak. Yeah. Price went up, though.
I know. Considerably.
At least 10%.
Today.
Yeah. Tune in tomorrow.
Oh, site plan approval expired on Forest Townhomes, 295 Elm.
Forest.
Yeah, I'm sorry to see that.
Don't they have a temporary fence around it? Is that?
Yep, they do, but we have
late.
tried and tried and tried to get them to do what we need them to do over a year. And they received one extension, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Last January, you guys.
So it's been 2 years.
Approved the same site plan after it expired in the first place.
Be like
Okay.
that Crosswinds.
Yeah.
Crosswinds in this project.
Okay.
There was a coffee shop we'd approved at 14 and Pierce, and they came in, that was when we updated for neighborhood
Yes.
commercial, and any idea what's going on with that? I mean,
Nada.
assuming nothing, but.
Yeah, so,
Nada.
I mean,
Everything's
I mean,
closed
they- but,
except
you
the
know,
cleaners.
But they spent a lot of money. They hired attorneys. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know, that's
That's
expensive.
really expensive.
I don't know. It's nothing really.
Value at twice the price.
Okay, enough. Draft agenda for April 23rd
You better
is
change it.
is now changed. We're deleting 3 study sessions.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, did we miss, no. April 23rd, now we're going to have a pre-app discussion with respect to Lux added in place of item K study session, right?
Yep.
Okay. I don't have any comments on the rest of the meeting because I won't be here. But the chairman will be back. And then I see that the proposed agenda for the 14th of May has 3 study sessions back, including the Triangle District bonus height. I think we got to try to wrap up some of these before we get into the big zoning project, which kicks
Yeah.
off when? July?
If we can prepare, it could kick off as soon as July, yes,
Yeah, okay.
if we get
So,
prepared.
so the May meeting is going to be important.
We'll know for sure there's a budget meeting on April 21st.
When is our next meeting with the commission?
Yeah, joint.
June.
Well,
June what? Do we know?
Yeah, it'd be neat to know.
Yes, I do.
the calendar.
June 16.
Coming out of your paycheck.
Okay. Bert's got to schedule an appointment with dental hygienist.
That gives us time to change it.
You got VRBOs.
Okay, no, it'll be a good meeting. And I think it's timely on the whole question of ordinance review.
What was the date, Nick?
June 16th,
Yep.
joint meeting.
It's like we always have done, I'll start bringing things closer to you so we can
Yeah.
kind of.
So thank you for the students attending, and I'm sure this was scintillating, probably better than studying English, though, so,
We typically get applause. but,
yeah.
you know,
The one thing I want to comment on is, if you look at the materials, and I didn't ask you to participate, but you, starting the next meeting, should feel free to participate. And really, I encourage you, particularly when we get into some of these study sessions, to give us your thoughts.
Yeah.
Some of us are on the back nine of life, and we could use some fresh perspectives, okay? All right, anything else? Meeting adjourned.